Bobby Owsinski's Inner Circle. I'm Bobby Owsinski, and this is a show all about music, music production, and the music business. My guest this week is mastering engineer Howie Weinberg. But let's start here. Many of you grew up with rock music as the soundtrack of your youth, and that's probably what you're still drawn to today. As you probably noticed, it's just not as popular anymore, but now we have statistical evidence from Dataface of just when it peaked and declined. The company looked at the Billboard Top 100 over time to determine not only the timeline of the rock genre, but the other huge music genre trends as well. The first one started in 1964 with the British invasion, and this was really the rise of rock music. Before that, it was rock and roll. In 1983, we had the synth generation, and of course, music was then created around synths and drum machines. In 1991, the next genre transition was to rap and hip-hop. Now, this is where the studies stopped, but I looked into this a little more and found a couple more definitive time periods. In 2007, we had EDM and the rise of DJs, and then in 2018, we had modern country music taking over. Now, through all this, there's been subgenres like grunge, which went from the late 1980s until Kurt Cobain's death in 1994. But if we come back and look at the rock genre, the final nail in the coffin, I think, came with the Guitar Hero game in 2005. After that, it seemed to be the end of the massive popularity of the genre. Pop has been a constant through all these other genres, as its popularity has always stayed about the same. Now, the interesting thing is YouGov did a survey and asked Americans what their favorite genre of music was. 20% said it was classic rock. 12% said country music. 8% said R&B, 7% said pop, 7% said hip-hop, and 6% said hard rock heavy metal. Rock may have peaked a long time ago, but it's still the most favored genre in the U.S. by a wide margin. If you have any comments or questions, you can send them to questions@bobbyowsinski.com. You can find out all about my books, including the Mixing Engineer's Handbook, Recording Engineer's Handbook, AI for Music Production, the Music Business Advice Book, and more at bobbyowsinski.com. There you can also read excerpts from all of my books and learn all about the latest in music, audio, and production news when you sign up for my newsletter. That's bobbyowsinski.com. Scientists have discovered that we can influence and change our brainwave patterns through something called brainwave entrainment. This refers to the phenomenon that brainwaves will naturally synchronize to the rhythm of any kind of external stimuli, and that could be like flickering lights or speech or music or vibrations. There are actually 5 states of this. Delta, which is 1 hertz to 4 hertz, and that's actually really good for deep sleep or pain relief, anti-aging, and healing. The next is theta, which is in the 4 to 8 hertz range. And this is good for REM sleep, deep relaxation, meditation, and creativity. The next one is alpha, and this is 8 to 13 hertz. That helps to relax our focus, relax our stress, positive thinking, and fast learning. Beta comes next, 13 to 30 hertz. This is for focused attention, cognitive thinking, and problem solving. And then the last is called gamma, and this is 30 hertz and above. This is for high-level cognition, memory recall, and peak awareness. Now, what happens is these frequencies are overlaid over white noise, and when that happens, it's called binaural beats. If you use headphones, what would happen is there'd be, for instance, 200 hertz played in the left ear and 205 in the right ear, and the difference between them would be 5 hertz, or the theta state for deep relaxation. Now, here's where it gets interesting, though. Universal Music just filed a patent application for adding neural beats into a standard song. The whole idea is that you'll like a song better because it will cause some sort of positive mental reaction on a very deep subconscious level. In its patent application, Universal Music noted that not all listeners actually enjoy listening to audio tracks that contain neural beats, but that probably won't stop them from trying it. On one hand, this seems like a great way to promote better mental health, and on the other, it feels really manipulative. Again, this is only in the patent stage, so I guess we really won't know for sure how we feel about it until we actually hear it. In the meantime, be aware that neural beats is an upcoming genre that might be worth checking out. My guest this week is mastering engineer Howie Weinberg, who has 20 Grammy Awards and 76 Grammy nominations, 4 Tech Awards, 2 Juno Awards, 1 Mercury Prize Award, 200 plus gold and platinum records, an unbelievable 19,000 total credits, and over 25 billion streams. Howie started working in the mailroom at Masterdisk in New York City, but soon became the apprentice of mastering legend Bob Ludwig. Within a few months, he was mastering tracks for hip-hop stars like Kurtis Blow, Run DMC, Grandmaster Flash, and Public Enemy. Since then, he's mastered projects for legends like U2, Nirvana, Sheryl Crow, The Clash, Madonna, Alice Cooper, Aerosmith, John Mellencamp, Ozzy Osbourne, and the list goes on. During our interview, Howie talked about mastering at the beginning of hip-hop, the tremendous volume of work that he does, why he thinks vinyl is a fad, why he creates both an analog and digital master, and so much more. I spoke with Howie via Zoom from his home in Santa Monica. I know you have an interesting story about how you started in the business, so let's go there. Well, you started from the bottom, right?
Well, I mean, if you want to consider, delivering packages and being the studio's first messenger. I started as a company, the studio Masterdisk. And then this is about 1980. A friend of mine who I knew for years had something to do with the studio there. And Bob Ludwig just started there. He had left at Sterling Sound. They were there for years in the mid-'70s to work over there. And they brought me in, and they wanted me to, I don't know, I wanted to do something. I had no experience as an engineer, but I kind of dabbled a little, but nothing. And they said, okay, well, we need somebody to deliver packages. We've been paying a messenger service, so you can be our company's first messenger boy. And if you want, after you're done working, you can come hang around studios with some of these old guys. So that's what I did. And so I knew where all the record labels were. I delivered packages all over town. And also the funny thing is, the studio, when I first started there, it was kind of an offshoot of Mercury Records, Mercury Studios, they had called it. It's on 57th Street, right? Like by 6th Avenue. It was kind of a Directors Guild of America building. Anyway, they had a contract with Mercury Records that they would do all their mastering and do all their. In those days, it was almost pre-CDs. It was just vinyl records. There was 8-tracks were still available, cassettes and vinyl records, and everybody heard about digital, but nobody really wanted to know about it. I mean, nobody kind of knew. Nobody knew what was the future. They just heard of it anyway. So a lot of my first duties as an engineer was to make tape copies or anything that was done on Mercury Records or Polygram or Polydor. They had like a bunch of RSO, they had the Bee Gees, they had all these big labels. Any project that was done for Mercury Records, they would send us a 15 IPS Dolby, a copy, and we would make dupes of it to send it out to worldwide, anything that was done in America. So any of their projects that were mastered or mastered in America, they would send us a tape copy, and then I had a bunch of Studer machines and some Scullies, a couple of Ampexes. We would just make one-to-one dupes, and we would ship them all over the world. And so that was my first responsibilities were to make one-to-one copies of current records that were released in America, that were mastered in America worldwide. So that was, it was a lot of hours of work. And my first big experience was one day they come to me, we got this record that's just coming out, and we need copies immediately. You're going to have to stay late. And it ended up being this Bee Gees Saturday Night Fever.
Wow.
I was actually the first guy to hear this record other than after it was recorded. They sent me the 15 inch, whatever copy. I think it was mastered somewhere at Capitol Records in LA. They sent me the copy, and I just spent 2 days making tape copies, sending it all over the world. So I heard that record before anybody. I thought it was pretty good, actually. When I first heard it, it was great. But and then you just basically they're just one-to-one dupes. Dolby A.
When did you get your first break to do your own mastering?
Well, that was another thing. Then the company had moved to a different location, and there was an older engineer there, and he just, I don't know, maybe they just didn't like him or wasn't working out. So he had a little cutting room with an old Scully lathe, some old Neumann EQs, a very basic rack with a Scully lathe, a Neumann cutter head, and a bunch of Neumann electronics and a bunch of, a couple of racks. I had an EMT compressor, I had some Neumann EQs, those old original IT and Sontec. So one day they said, we're firing him. You go in and work there.
Wow.
I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't know I didn't know how to change a cutter head. I didn't know how to change it, It was all just learn on the run. Okay. And I picked it up, and the thing was, his room was kind of had the lowest, it had a computer that wasn't as good as the Neumann computer. It had a Neumann cutter head, so that was good, but it was an antiquated system that they knew they had to get rid of. And they put me in there, and I ended up just doing all these other big records. We had all these contracts with all these labels, and I was out there. I was eager, to do whatever. And this is exactly when hip hop and rap music started coming out. So it came out, and this guy called me, goes, well, I have this, whatever, rap music. And I didn't realize, but it turned out to be one of the biggest selling rap records. Is Kurtis Blow, is called The Christmas Rappin' and the Breaks. There was it was, I think, the first gold 12-inch record. So I got in with all the Def Jam people, the Russell Simmons, all that whole thing. So I was known as the guy, I did all those records. I just brought him in. I was known as the guy who did all those crazy hip hop records. So then they just flowed in like crazy. And what happened was I had so much work that, and I was, I wasn't really that happy with all that equipment. I couldn't really make hot records out of them. I just couldn't get the sounds I wanted out of that room. So they ended up with doing was they made, Bob had the other studio, Ludwig, and he had the nice Neumann console. He had the dual lathes. So we made a deal with the studio that when he leaves at 6:00, because he would come in the morning, the clients would come in. These are all pretty big records. At the end of the day, this is still pre-digital. He would hand me a big notepad or big cutting sheet with all the EQs and everything for each track. So, everything had to be done in real time.
Yeah.
And luckily his room had the Neumann console that was like split in half, where there was like, you can do while you're mastering one side, the other side you set up like two separate Sontecs, two separate Neumann EQs, two separate compressors. Everything was split, so you just at the next song you hit one button and you go to the other side. But you got to keep setting it up as you go along.
Yeah.
It's like 25 minutes and set up this one and that one, and you got to go with the notes. And if you miss it, or whatever it is, I got pretty good at it. So Bob let me use his room on the condition that I would have to do his work at the end of the day. So I would show up at 5:36 after he was with the clients. Either the clients would be there, or he would give me all the notes. There's the tapes. You got to do all this, and then you could do your own work afterwards in his studio, which was the best studio with dual lathes, a really nice Neumann console with the big monitors, the whole 9 yards. And that went on for a while, maybe 6 months, a year. Then we realized that wasn't working out, so they built me another studio on the other side. And so they gave me the good equipment, the good Neumann console with the good EQs and everything, and the lathe, and I was off to the races, pretty much. This was like early 80s, 81, 82. And then I was just doing, I don't know, a lot of records, because everything was sequenced and you could do 4 or 5 albums a day, maybe 6 albums a day. Everything was pretty much handed in side A, side B, almost pre-CDs, and everything like that. So, and everything was still analog, very, digital was just showing up around the early 80s, those Sony 1600s, 1630s. They all sounded, I don't know. I wasn't that interested one way or the other. It sounded good. It's digital, I just started doing just every record under the sun, from the hip hop records, and it was rock records, pop records. I can't even imagine how many records I have done, and then these are all, and everything had to be cut to, lacquer. And then there was also tape copies to be made for cassettes, and then CDs came along, and then we'd have to do the CD masters, and then the whole thing, which all went on to Sony 1630. And there was a lot of stuff that went on.
So, Howie, when did you go out on your own?
Oh, that's like way 2009. So I did everything 80s, 90s, up until, when the studio got passed along. I mean, after Bob had left, and then after, so I didn't really start my own place. There was a point where everything was kind of like, if you don't own the place, you'll really never. I mean, they were all my clients. I was doing countless numbers of big hit records, and if you work for a firm, they're going to pay you, as little as they can. I mean, and not as little as they can, a commission of that part. But that was, it was still all my clients, but the studio, provided me with the space and all that. So it was basically working for them. And, in this business, if you'll never make any money, if you're working for somebody else.
Yeah.
And I did it for a long time. And there were a couple of mistakes I made. This is after Bob left in the mid 90s, and he started doing really well on his own. So the studio convinced me to stay there for longer and longer. And then after a while, it just wasn't worth my while. I mean, all the clients were mine. I was doing all the work, and it's like, hey, I can do this on my own without a problem. At that time, also, when I left in 2009, the whole vinyl thing, you didn't really need cutting lathes like you did before. Now maybe people still need them, but I don't get it. But there was a lag for like 15 years where nobody wanted to see anything lacquered,
Yeah.
So I didn't have to worry about getting any cutting equipment, which was really it could be a big problem starting a studio. It's just so much maintenance, so much, it's just, you can't just press play and press record. There's so much to do, so many things to go wrong, and so many problems, with lacquers and this and that. I didn't have to worry about that. And any cutting stuff I did, I had a partner in New York, the guy Carl Awadi at that True Tone studio. I would send him files, and he would do all, he would ghost my cutting work. So I didn't have to buy any cutting equipment, so on and so forth. So then I could kind of set up on my own without any of that involvement.
Howie, let me ask you a question that I ask every mastering engineer that I get on this show. How long did it take before you felt really comfortable about the masters that you were cutting?
I didn't know. After maybe 6 months or a year in.
Okay.
Yeah. I was doing so many records every day. There would be piles of stuff that came in. When I first started, a lot of the, like I said, we also had to deal with Mercury Records, Polygram. We do a lot of their cutting work and a lot of their mastering work. And then they would send me all the original works as well. So I would say about 6 months and a year in, after I got a feel of what actually, what I could do to take a recording to the next level with the limitations of the format, I mean, vinyl records, there's a limitation. When you get to the middle of the record to the end, it doesn't sound as good, and you want to get certain sounds out of it, and you have to, there's such a limitation there. And if you want 10 dB or more bottom, it's going to overcut. That's why I really felt like, that I had arrived when I first first heard about CDs, where I could put 10 dB more bottom on, I can make it super bright, and it's not going to overcut. It's not going to cause chaos on the cutter heads and then the limited amount. I mean, no matter how you slice it, vinyl records are like the Flintstones. You have a rock and you're cutting it over there, and people think it sounds better. I've never heard a vinyl record really that I've ever heard that sounded good to me. There was always something that went wrong, either pops, ticks, overcuts. You have to limit the bottom. You got to take everything and put it in the center just to make it fit on that Flintstones type record. So for me, if you really want to know, it's like first day we started getting, with the CDs started coming on them like early 80s, 82, 83. When we first started producing CDs, and mastering for CD. That's when I realized, wow, I could do all the stuff I want to do and make everything really, not over the top, but really kind of, push the limit. And you could never do that with vinyl records. It would always be a problem. And I tried to do that with vinyl records a lot, and it kind of bit me in the ass sometimes. You'd have to recut things, redo things and over again because it was overcutting or, whatever. It was smearing the sound and so on and so forth. So if you really want to, it's like probably when we first found out we could produce masters for CD, where there's no limitations. There were, but not like they weren't for vinyl records.
Well, what do you do now when you have to deliver a master for vinyl?
I have a partner. I say the same. I do everything.
Is it a different master though? A different master than your CD master?
That's the fallacy. You master for perfect sound, and that's it. You don't try to master for a format it'll bite you in the ass in the end. And it's just, it's nobody knows. And you can't really judge how the final sound will come out. You just master for perfect sound. And that's how I work. I just, and then hopefully it'll fit into the format. The only thing, like vinyl records, the same thing. It's the same problem I had 40 years ago that we have today. It's a limitation. There's only a certain amount of bass you can put on, a certain amount of phase you can put in. And so I don't really take, I don't consider vinyl record. I think it's just it's a fad, and it's never been a good sound. They're terrible sounding. They remind me of bad sounding CDs. And eventually, I don't know how many people actually think people put a record on, oh, how great it is. No, it's not really. It's a format that really that's really just a boutique thing. And people like it because there's big covers, they can feel the music, but for perfect sound, no, not happening.
Okay, so how much has your setup changed from when you started to where it is today?
You know what? Not as much as you might think. I still have those big Soundtech EQs. I got a set of these old NTP compressors I had in the 80s. I found them there in Denmark. Not really. I mean, I don't use that old Neumann stuff anymore. I have some very modern SPL equipment that has very jacked up, 120 volt power supplies, and in the digital end, I have all these, these really super clocks and everything. So the only thing I would say that's better is the analog chain has gotten a bit cleaner, and the clocking is as good as it can possibly be. When I'm seeing the digital clocking, I used to think it's all the same. It's just ones and zeros. But when I first heard those Antelope, those atomic clocks, I don't know if you.
Yeah.
I did an A/B test with the clock that Sony had given, it was, the Digit Design and a few other ones. It was like night and day. I was like, wow, this is so different. This one sounds beautiful and the other one sounds like mushy. And I didn't realize the clocking. The most important thing right now for me is the clocking and the power supplies. All my analog equipment has, the SPL stuff has super duper 120 volt power supplies, and all the digital stuff I play back. When I master, I just want to make clear, the digital equipment's gotten really good. I have plugins up the wall. I have every great one. I mean, the digital hardware I don't really do anymore. It's all, I believe it's really hasn't, I don't think it's any better. It looks better to the clients, but so when I do a project, I master everything, digital plugins and a whole digital setup. And I also master it through a whole analog setup, which is my SPL analog front end, my Soundtech EQs, my SPL compressors, or my NTP compressors, and analog, full digital on every project now, because I just I got to the point where there'd be too many recalls. It was like you do something analog, they want, I want it to sound more like what we gave you, or you do it more digital, and they want to say more sound, more color. So what I do nowadays is I just do everything twice, and
Wow.
it takes a little bit more time, but in the end, I save time on the other end of recalls. The client will get in and go either like this or like that, or maybe we'll put a little mixer together. But one is very close to what they did, digital one. The other one has more analog color. So whatever they're looking for, they've got.
Yeah.
So my flow is much easier now. I don't get as much, redos that I used to.
When you get mixes in, do you see problems in mixes or in the masters that you get that seem to be the same thing over and over?
I'm not that judgmental that I used to be. I'm not a producer. I'm not a mixing guy. So whatever somebody gives me, if this is their best thing, I'll work with it. I really will. The only thing that I've been getting lately is, and I work on a lot of big records and with a lot of well-known engineers, and they send me they have reference mixes. So when they're mixing a record, they try to get, this is what they've given the client, which is through it's going through another digital limiter and getting really loud. They're giving me a reference mix that's super loud, and then giving me the normal mix that has uncompressed. And a lot of times I get it and goes, wow, their reference mix is so hot that you can't, the point is you want to give them something as good as what they have or better that they've already done. So I don't recommend it, but I have, what I have to do is just sometimes I have to try to make things more louder than I'd like, only because I have to get to the same place where their reference mix was. Which is fine. I mean, not all the time, but a lot of the producers I know, the reference mixes don't even, I can beat those really fast, and then you're ahead of the game.
Well, what do you tell if someone calls you and say what would help you work the best? Do you say, well, like take the limiter off or something?
Well, yeah, I would just give me both. I mean, I hate to say it, but I want to know what the client's listening to, the artists are listening to, and what it sounds like before that. I mean, most records, not all of them, but a lot of the major ones, like, again, it goes back to they're sending reference mixes out to the artists, because they want to, that's what they're hearing. They want to hear everything louder, like, kind of, I don't recommend it, but it works. And then you got to copy what they did, or, try to give it a little better. But generally speaking, I can always beat a reference mix.
What's the most fun for you? I mean, in mastering, what really lights you up?
I don't know, working on really good, working on good projects with good, good artists, and not really. What makes fun for me is like enjoying that I can do something. I mean, these days, I could probably do 100, 150 albums a year, maybe 200 a year. I do usually like 200 songs a month, maybe even more. But I get paid to, play with people's music. I have a studio in my house. What's fun for me is making good music, and also, making a good living out of it. And this is something that I'm really good at. You're working with a lot of new artists, upcoming artists, indie artists, major artists. The thing I'm really good at is And when there's people like, I mean, I don't really have an ego. I'll work with the guy who has the band down the block, or I'll be working with some big platinum artist, at the same time. And the way I've looked at, the last, I don't know, 10 years or so, if you want to pay me, I will make something good for you. And there's a rate structure there that obviously, that you have to deal with as well, because everybody has a certain budget. The indie clients have budgets, the major labels have budgets. A lot of the stuff I do I do a lot of stuff for music that's been composed, like for shows and everything. I do a lot of stuff for the gamers, EA. Everybody has their budgets, and the main thing is right away just figuring out what I can get out of this. And everyone is different, and everybody pays differently, but it's all good, It's all a day's work for.
Yeah, I get it.
But that's really that's what makes me happy is more like just working constantly, I get up and I open my email and there's this 4 or 5 other I'm missing, and then somebody sends me an email saying, "Wow, you've done all of my favorite records ever, and here's my project." And then we have to figure out what they can afford. I have a certain rate I get, and if and then there's for indies and for major, like I said. So, and then we work it out and we do the project, and it comes out great, and everybody's happy.
Yeah.
So to me, I've done so many big records. I don't want to sound like I'm cutting my own horn, but I've done so many famous big records. It just, to me, it's just, I like helping the indie kids out, and the kids, the locals, whatever it is, and all of that. So it's just a combination of everything, pretty much.
What's one thing that you wish people knew about what you do? Like, is there one thing that they just don't get?
I don't really want to. I mean, I can do work. I can do a record that may take somebody 2 or 3 hours. I can do it in a half hour, 40 minutes. My head is. I've done so many projects in my life. I've somebody counted almost. I've done 19,000 credits. I don't know, somewhere in there. 200 billion record sales. 100, and I can show you. I can put something on and know exactly where it's supposed to end up at any moment, right away. I don't need to go, But then there's also the stuff that you have to work a little, you have to really zero in on, Or there's the mixes that you get that are just perfect, and you just kind of, you put it, you put your spin on it, and everything is great. Or the mixes that just sound challenging, that you have to work a little harder on.
Is there a genre that you find more difficult than others?
A lot of the hip hop stuff, you gotta, it's overloaded and too loud, or not really. The pop rock stuff, I can, is really, I've done so many of those. You just know what's gonna sound good. I have some great monitors in my studio. You see, my setup has big monitors, medium monitors, small monitors, and tiny ones, and little bookshelf type speakers. So I generally have 2 sets of monitors that I trust. The big ones, which are more fun, and these other small monitors that that are just, but you just know. It's really something that's hard to really put your finger on unless you put something on and wow. Could be a little brighter. Oh, this is really good. Maybe, I don't want to do any harm. It's really bright. You just have to know exactly, I could have 500 button, knobs on there, but only 4 work, or 3 work, or 6 work, and then the dynamic thing, what certain plugins do a certain sound, and certain analog, gear, gives it more of an analog sound. That's why, for me, it's really important to do an analog and a digital pass of almost everything I do now, unless one sticks out that's better than the other. It gives the client, they've got 2 flavors. They've got old school analog, converters, clocking, analog EQs, and the other one is more modern. I wouldn't say more modern, a whole digital mastering system where it's, it's plugins and you're not going in any analog domain. So everything stays pretty much closer to what the mix. And the digital stuff does have a lot, sometimes has better separation to make the vocals sound a little louder, but unless the client's giving me which I also do when I take on a project, I ask them if they have any direction or anything they want me to go. And sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. So, but what I try to do is just do everything where it's pretty fail safe, where they get a good digital sound, they get a good analog sound, and they can just put it together and see which they like. For me, it just keeps my workflow going better because I don't do as many recalls.
Well, what monitors are you using? Are they the same as what you started on?
Yeah, no, everything's. Since I've been out here, I got those big PMCs, the big ones.
Yeah.
Or whatever they want to do. They're pretty good, I mean, they're, the room is tuned to them. They're really good. I like them because you can play stuff loud, and I like playing loud music. And now my new favorites are the guy Keith Clatwitter, the guy who started Care. He had these new monitors, Katie, and they're fantastic. I was afraid to get them, and then he kept calling me, and then he made me come over and hear him in his place, and then I went over there, and he's playing stuff in his living room, and they sounded good, but I said I can't tell, unless I put him in my studio, and then he kind of just bugged the fuck out of me. I'm sorry, and I said, all right, and he gave it to me at a really good price. So I took him home and I plugged him in and I went, wow, these are great, fantastic speakers. They're they're forward sounding speakers. They're not dark. They're bright and energetic, So I like them. And clients love them because they have a very, very unique sound, and they're all powered and you plug and play but also I have an old set of, I have an old NS10s. I have the Genelecs, the 1031s, the kind of classics. I have some little Advent bookshelves, and some headphones, all the above. But, for my flow is I just go on the big ones or the KRK ones, or sometimes the Genelec ones. There's no magic speaker anywhere in this life, in this world. Some sound a little better than others, but speakers are not magic.
Tell me about before I forget, tell me about your plugin.
Well, that plugin is, there's a new one coming out. So then the old one, and you've seen it, it's through acoustic. It's pretty much over the top digital piece. It's really good. It really kind of got me into where it's a one plugin that can emulate all my SPL stuff, my Soundtech stuff, all the compressors and everything with converters and the whole thing. You need a certain kind of computer to play these things well, to use them. And if you don't, I can't even use them myself. You don't, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
The CPU and everything. But I know people that have it and they love it. They couldn't believe how great it sounds. We spent a lot of time doing it. My next one's going to be very simple, not as many knobs and buttons, and it's in the works now, but nothing's finalized. But it's all done. But the next one will be a much easier one.
All right, Howie, last question. What's the best piece of advice that maybe you learned along the way or somebody imparted to you?
But my piece of advice is, always make the client happy, no matter what, even if they're asking for something you don't think is correct. And be open-minded. Okay, and that's, I guess that would be the piece of advice. And a couple of times years ago, I remember I used to see Bob Ludwig. He'd be working on a lot of these records, and he'd be doing some pretty gigantic records. And in a couple of days, he'd have some crappy records. And how do you put up with it? He says, well, it's more about the client for me. Just, whatever somebody does, you make them happy. Even if it's not, an A-list project or it's a B-list. You just try to make the client happy, no matter what. They walk out of there going, yeah, this guy's great. I can, let's do another one next time around. You
can find out more about Howie at Howie Weinberg Mastering. That's Howie Weinberg Mastering, HOWIEWEINBERG, mastering, all one word, .com. Thanks for listening and being in my inner circle. Remember, if you have any questions or comments, you can send them to questions@bobbyowsinski.com. You can also learn all about the latest in music, audio, and production news when you sign up for my newsletter at bobbyowsinski.com. There you'll also find out about openings for my latest online classes and special events. That's bobbyowsinski.com. To listen to other episodes of Bobby Owsinski's Inner Circle, go to bobbyowsinski.com and select the podcast tab, or go to bobbyowinnercircle.com, or you can find it on Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Mixcloud, YouTube Music, Spotify, Deezer, TuneIn Radio, Radio Public, and Podbean. At bobbyowsinski.com and bobbyowinnercircle.com, you'll also find a sign-up form for my newsletter and for alerts for new podcasts. This is Bobby Owsinski. I will see you next time.